Germany is generally overlooked from this list. It is true that the country, whose unification came late and whose defeat of France in 1871 serves as cement, appears essentially as a continental European power. And yet, in reality, German interest in colonial expansion was as early as that of other peoples. From the 16th century, during the following 2 centuries, many German states attempted to establish themselves in the American colony of Klein-Venedig, Little Venice, in present-day Venezuela, initiated by a family of bankers from Augsburg in 1528. Attempts at Caribbean colonization by the Duchy of Courland in 1637, then in 1642, as well as in Africa in 1651, the county of Hanau in 1669, in the north of present-day Brazil, or especially Brandenburg, Prussia, which, bolstered by the first regular military navy initiated in Germany in 1684, launched an attempt to colonize the Ghanaian and Mauritanian coasts, as well as a few Caribbean islands, notably in the present thwarted by the British and Dutch. The Prussians attempted, without lasting success in the mid-18th century, to open a trading post in China at Canton. All these failures were obviously linked to the hostility of Germany's other colonial competitors, but also and especially to the absence of political unity in the old Holy Roman Empire, fragmented into no fewer than 1,800 diverse independent entities. German unity forged by Bismarck at the expense first of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1866, and secondly of France in 1871, did not radically change the colonial situation immediately. The German Chancellor initially remained opposed to any idea of colonial adventure, considered a useless dispersal of the early years of the 1880s. As a highly industrialized country, Germany faced the dual problem of raw material supply and the disposal of its finished products. It could not remain under the threat of economic embargo from other world powers. Moreover, its economy, though very dynamic, did not allow it to offer work to all German citizens. Nearly 4 million of them emigrated, mainly to the United States. A deliberate colonial policy would thus allow the metropole to gain resources, open an internal market that had become economically too small, and provide prospects for an overly numerous population. Encouraged by financial and military circles, but also by public opinion wishing to see Germany rise, on this level, to the height of its French and British rivals, Bismarck finally rallied to the idea of a German colonial policy in 1884. He explains himself at length before the Reichstag. In the system of colonization that I call French, the state must judge daily whether the enterprise is good and has prospects of success. In our system we leave to commerce, to individuals, the choice. And if we see the tree take root, grow and prosper, if the creators of the enterprise invoke the protection of the empire, then we will grant them our protection, which moreover we cannot refuse them. He summarizes his colonial thinking with the following formula. From then on, the Germans pulled out all the stops to carve out an overseas domain. But there was less and less space to conquer, and ultimately the German colonial empire, a late arrival, suffered from geographical dispersion and a cruel lack of territorial continuity. But all things considered, it managed to develop on 3 continents, Africa, Asia and Oceania, an attempt to establish itself in the Americas on the small island of Klein-Venedig in the German colonization to become homogeneous and was divided into 7 distinct administrative units. In Asia, the concession of Kiautschou around the port of Qingdao constituted a model establishment and a true showcase of Germany in Asia, to the point of exciting the unreserved admiration of the first president of the newly created Chinese Republic. German possessions in Oceania were divided into 2 entities. First, German New Guinea, a disparate and very extensive territory, comprising the northeast part of New Guinea, the neighboring archipelago of New Britain, the Admiralty Islands, and the northern part of the Solomon Islands, to which were added the Marshall Islands, Nauru, the Micronesian archipelagos of the Carolines, Palaus, and Marianas. This territory had only 480,000 inhabitants in 1914, of which only 1,300 Europeans and 772 Germans. The other administrative entity consisted of the western part of the German Samoa constituted a small and far more homogeneous colonial ensemble. The German flag was raised in Apia, the capital of the Protectorate, on March 1, 1900, in the presence of the new governor, Wilhelm Solf. The latter was a confirmed diplomat who would manage his territory with great humanity and sophistication. Indigenous chiefdoms and institutions were maintained, customs respected. Solf established a school system open to all, created a hospital, founded a newspaper of general information, the Samoanische Zeitung, and developed the local economy. On the eve of the First World War, German Samoa had 35,000 indigenous inhabitants, nearly 2,000 Chinese and 500 Europeans. But it was in Africa that the bulk of the German colonial domain developed, centered around four possessions. First, Togoland, a small territory of 87,200 square kilometers, elongated in shape, with 52 kilometers of coastline overlooking the Gulf of Benin. If the colonization of this territory was an economic success, earning it the nickname of Muster Kolonie, or Model Colony, it was far from being a settlement colony in 1914. There were indeed only 363 whites, of whom only 327 Germans, for an indigenous population of approximately 1 million. The second of the four African colonies of Germany was Deutsch-Südwestafrika. Established in the territory of present-day Namibia, this colony was old since the first trading post was founded in 1883. It was in Deutsch-Südwestafrika that the uprising of the Herero and Nama tribes took place from 1904 to 1907, followed by terrible genocidal repression, recognized in 2021 by the German government. On the eve of the First World War, German Southwest Africa was again on the path to development. The rail infrastructure counted more than 2,000 kilometers of track. In 1912, for the first time since the colony's founding, the trade balance was positive by 8 million gold marks, largely thanks to the boom in diamond production. The indigenous population was probably below 300,000 people. As for the population of European origin, it was 18,800 individuals in 1914, of whom 12,300 were German and nearly 2,500 were Boers. A third of these African colonies was Cameroon, Africa, the only German settlement colony, which returned to France in 1918. This vast colony of 750,000 square kilometers with probably more than 3 million inhabitants struggled to be developed. The climate was largely tropical and the terrain difficult with imposing mountain ranges. The Germans had ambitious railroad projects, of which fewer than 300 kilometers of the 2,000 planned were built by 1914. On the eve of the war, although the colony's trade balance was distinctly in deficit, the gap tended to close over the years. Undeniably, Cameroon was in 1914 a very promising last but not least, German East Africa, Deutsch-Ostafrika, constituted the fourth colonial territory of the German Empire. Encompassing the present-day states of Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi, this vast territory experienced troubled beginnings with endemic revolts that forced the Germans to create their first regular colonial troops in 1891 under the title of Schutztruppe, with the first indigenous units, the Askaris. On the eve of the war, Deutsch-Ostafrika was a territory in full expansion, having only 5,339 Europeans, of whom 4,107. Yet it was there that German colonial resistance to Allied troops would be the most determined. While most German colonies were conquered as early as 1914, followed by the capitulation of Deutsch-Südwestafrika in 1915 and then Cameroon in 1916, the German troops of Deutsch-Ostafrika, despite being cut off from all support from the German metropole, resisted until the end of the war, thanks in particular to the ingenuity and determination of General von Lettow-Vorbeck. In total, the 14,500 German colonial combatants managed to escape the grip of no fewer than 267,000 Allied soldiers, even managing the luxury of reporting one final victory on November 12th. The German colonial adventure would definitely end in 1919 with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles and the confiscation of all its colonial empire. If the question of the recognition of the genocide of the Herero and Nama came to shine a tragic light on Germany's colonial past, the reality of the German colonial legacy is, however, less dark. On one hand, because in many territories, notably Oceanic, the only infrastructure work undertaken over decades was done under German administration, and secondly because communities, notably linguistic ones, notably the case in Namibia, where nearly 32,000 whites declared German as their mother tongue, to which must be added 45,000 blacks and mixed race who speak a pidgin derived from German Küchendeutsch, while in New Guinea survives the only existing German Creole, Unser Deutsch. Namibia furthermore possesses the only German-language daily newspaper in Africa, the Allgemeine Zeitung, founded in 1916. In China, the Deutsch-Chinesische Hochschule, created in 1909, has become today the University of Qingdao, which counts 50,000 students. In April 2017, Togo and Germany announced the creation of a German-African Chamber. A word by way of conclusion concerning the former German indigenous combatants of Deutsch-Ostafrika. In 1952, General von Lettow-Vorbeck, then 83 years old, undertook a final struggle, that of obtaining justice for his old African comrades in arms. He traveled to East Africa in 1953. When he died in 1964, a few dozen former Askaris made the trip at their own expense to pay a final tribute to their general. A post was installed by the German government in Tanganyika to receive the grievances of approximately 350 survivors. To obtain back pay and benefit from retirement rights, applicants had to produce documents or equipment items from the Imperial Army, but some no longer possessed any souvenirs, so it was decided to have them take a weapons handling test in German, following the old imperial regulations of the colonial troops. Each of the 350 African veterans, without exception, passed the test.